Firearms Nation podcast, episode number 12.
Welcome to the Firearms Nation podcast. Each week, go inside the minds of top competitive shooters, firearms instructors, gear and gun manufacturers, journalists, and other people on the cutting edge of the Firearms Nation. Join us and get answers to the questions you want to know. And now, here's your host, Arik Levy.
And welcome back to the Firearms Nation podcast. Once again, the Firearms Nation podcast gets into the minds of the people that make up the Firearms Nation. We bring you the insight and technology so you can make informed decisions on self-defense, competition, and the right to bear arms. The Firearms Nation podcast is brought to you by the Shooter Summit. Learn from the top firearms instructors, both tactical and competitive, on what you need to do today to become a better shooter. From the SWAT officer to the soccer mom, everyone has a right to self-defense and everyone can get better at shooting. Go online at shootersummit.com and sign up to watch this online summit. The 2017 summit is already being recorded, so stay tuned on the Firearms Nation podcast for more information. The book Refinement and Repetition was a game changer in my firearms training program. Like most people, it sat on my shelf for years as I contemplated getting better until one day on a flight, I was listening to a new podcast that I discovered called That Shooting Show. The host, he was kind of a crazy guy, was giving nuggets of information, which he called speed mode and accuracy mode and finally match mode. He referenced the first 12 drills of this book as a surefire way to move up in classification, which is what I wanted to do. You know, I competed in and I still compete in USPSA, which is the United States Practical Shooting Association. And in fact, he made Grandmaster in 9 months using this program, which is a feat that eludes most people their entire shooting career. Steve Anderson is also a firearms instructor and authored 2 more books, Principles of Performance and Get to Work. In those books, besides the dry practice drills, he dives into the biggest component of any competitive sport, doesn't have to be shooting, and that's the mental game. Steve references Lanny Basham, who was an Olympic gold medalist and mental coach, who also wrote this great book called With Winning in Mind, and I'll reference that in the show notes. Steve talks about how you define success is critical for achieving your goals. And he also tells us what we value more is the stuff that we actually have to work for, not the stuff that we're given. In my interview, we also learn how he got his teenage sales clerks killing their approach and becoming the most successful team in the region, which all stems from the same principles that he teaches his students. Steve was also an instructor featured in the 2016 Shooter Summit and will be part of the 2017 Summit as well. I've trained with him and he has coached me through some major matches, especially when I was shooting for Team SIG. I was very happy to have him as today's guest. So without further ado, here's Steve Anderson. Now, for those of you that don't know Steve, he is probably the biggest Van Halen fan east of the Mississippi.
I'm up there, yeah.
You're up there for sure.
Yeah.
If you don't like Van Halen, you might have to just tune it out during his podcast. He is the host of That Shooting Show, a podcast that, frankly, helped my shooting altogether, not just competitively, but altogether, by teaching me these concepts of speed mode and match mode and why and how to dry practice. So we'll get into that with Steve. But anyways, besides your breakfast, thank you for being on the show.
You're welcome. And by the way, I want I want to thank you for starting with a breakfast question because I thought we were still doing sound check. I didn't realize that the program had actually started. So you really dodged a bullet there, asking me about morning habits without getting more information than you wanted.
Well, that is the old sound engineer when they mic you up when you go into the studio just to get the sound level. They'll ask you what you have for breakfast because it gets people talking unless they're like, I don't eat breakfast. I just had a cigarette or whatever that they come up with. But, it was kind of interesting. Believe it or not, it helps when you go to matches because I don't know about you. When I go to some of these bigger matches and they have these, picnics and barbecues at lunch and you eat all that, you don't want to shoot in the afternoon.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Grown men in NASCAR jerseys sitting around having 2 burgers and 2 pieces of cherry pie at nationals. Show me a sport where during halftime they have fried chicken and dessert and then go back out and compete. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
It is, and I think it's. I understand that they want to make it a fun atmosphere, but for some people this is a serious sport. This is their sport that they compete in, and it's kind of tough to separate the two.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and you can tell the people that are more interested in socializing, they tend to reside in C class, and if that's their level of participation and they're going to matches for the food, more power to them. It's not my thing. I'd rather go look at the next stage than I would sit there and have barbecue.
Now you've been shooting for what, 20 years?
Something like that. Yeah, 15, 20, something like that.
And, when did you discover Lanny Basham?
Well, we can thank Travis Tomasi for that. Travis Tomasi is responsible for my love of Caspian, my preference, generally speaking, for black sites over fiber optics. He saved me years of load development by saying use 7625 or 4756, doesn't matter which one, just use one of those, saved me all that time. Travis was so kind to me in the beginning because I could email him and call him and he would respond, and he was always so kind. But Travis turned me on to Lanny Basham. It was after I had made GM and I couldn't figure out why. I had a card that said I was good, but when I went out of town, I was not good. And I couldn't understand these things. So Travis said, read this book. You'll feel like it was written for you. And he was right.
And for the people that don't know Lanny Basham, this is a guy who was national champion in air rifle, and it's an amazing story.
Not air rifle, long range rifle.
Long range rifle. So it wasn't, they were shooting real bullets, not the pellet.
Absolutely.
Okay, and he was a national champion, and I believe he was a world champion, but he was going to the Olympics. He went up for the gold medal match and came away with the silver. And he didn't understand what happened because he could feel all the things just falling apart while he was shooting. And he spent the next, 4 years in between the Olympics talking to every gold medalist he could come across to find out what were they doing or thinking when they were competing. And they all came up with pretty much the same thing about how important the mental game was. The physical part, everybody's at the same level, but it was the mental part that was separating him. And he became an expert, and he wrote this book with winning in mind. And it's an amazing book. I got turned on to it by you, and it seemed like it was written for me. I don't know if you had the same experience.
Well, yeah, that's the same thing Travis told me. He said, you'll feel like the book was written for you when you read this book. And I had the same experience. Now, there's 2 things I want to add to your description. Number one, most of those winners, when he asked them what they were thinking about, gave him some version of nothing. Or they weren't able to explain it. But the experiences were very similar. What do you think about? Not much. What do you think about? Nothing. Okay, what do you think about? Nothing. But the problem is, it's not possible to induce a state of thinking about nothing, right? The other thing I want to put in there is that I had a lot of trouble with the Lanny Basham stuff at first because of the duality of these sports.
Explain that.
Well, most sports are single-natured. For example, in golf, they're not timing you. In bullseye shooting, yes, there's a time limit, but nobody's timing the individual shot. So you only have to be accurate. And if you look at track, you only have to be fast. Now, you have to have some endurance, whatever, but they're only measuring speed. The action shooting sports are the only sports that I can think of that have a timed nature. You know, it'd be like if racing, if NASCAR, what if your hit factor was your time divided by your fuel economy? You know what I mean? How would that work? You know, well, Joe Bob Jr. came in first, but he had terrible fuel economy, and Jed came in second with slightly better fuel economy, so his hit factor is a little better. I mean, it's ridiculous. But when we program ourselves via the Basham method, we have to be really careful what we program because we can only give our conscious mind one job. So that's what I mean. I had a lot of trouble because my first program was be smooth, be fast, be accurate. Okay, well, those are three different goals, three different jobs for the conscious mind. So what the conscious mind has to do is figure out what you really want. And it does that by whatever you're picturing. Okay, and what you're picturing is speed. So it says, well, we're a little confused down here in the control room, but we seem to be getting more speed than anything else. So speed it is. And
you call that speed mode.
Yeah. Or you can make a similar mistake that's almost as bad and choose accuracy. And anytime you make a conscious choice between speed and accuracy, you leave the other one on the table for your competitors. Now, those of you that listen to my show know that I will order you to write things down. So I will take the liberty of doing that on our show, and I will say, write this down. When you choose between speed and accuracy, you leave the other one on the table for your competitors.
Okay, so so you've had this podcast for 6 years, 5 years?
Yeah, it's been at least 4. Yeah, 4 or 5, including some real stinkers in the beginning when I was trying to figure it out.
The quit smoking podcast. That was a good one.
You know what you get, buddy, with me is, and just like I told you before this interview and before the other interview, if you don't want to know the answer, don't ask me the question because I will tell you the truth. You know? And when you do a daily program, essentially about one thing, it's going to veer off in some different directions. And let's face it, life and shooting cannot exist without each other. You know, so you'll invariably get some life lessons. But I've had people write to me and tell me that they've applied some of this stuff to their non-shooting life. So as long as we're helping people and having fun, man, I'm on board.
But where I'm going to this is you've been talking about speed mode and accuracy mode and match mode for 5 years now. Does it ever just bore the hell out of you and say, I wish I can move on to something else?
No, it never bores me. It concerns me that it's becoming boring to other people, but it never bores me. And I'll give you, it's funny. I was just thinking about this the other day. How many churches do you drive by that have those goofy signs? You know, and you've seen most of these signs before, but I always read them because they've got, you know.
Well, give me an example.
Well, you've seen the signs outside of churches, right? It can't be unique to Ohio. You know,
well, I'm just saying, you know, down here in Florida, we don't really. I'm trying to think. I don't see, you know, at least in my area of operations, we don't have churches with the advertising. So I like to have some description of what you're saying.
You know how when you go by Burger King and it says Whoppers are 2 for $5 or whatever, you know, as a brief aside, when I first saw those signs in high school, it would say now hiring closers. I'd go by and take the C off. But anyway, so just like fast food joints have those little signs where they can have little advertisements. Well, here in Ohio, at least, and I know it's true in Texas as well. The churches have little signs out front, And like, for example, this week on the one down in the corner of my street, the church sign says, starting over is not the same thing as giving up, which is pretty cool. That's a very insightful little nugget to chew on your way to work, if you're in the thinking business, and most of us are, or we should be at least. But if you think about how many churches are in just your town, and they're all saying pretty much the same thing for at least 2 services a week, if not 3. You got your 10 commandments and general admonishment not to be an a-hole, and that's pretty much it for every religion. So we're talking about the same thing, and it's my job as a communicator or an educator to find a way so that every person listening can understand it. And it also needs reinforcement. Shooters are very prone to thinking that they've solved the big problem and then going on down the road only to find out that the big problem has to be solved every time they pick up a gun, certainly at a match. You never solve these things permanently. You just develop a process that addresses the problem so that you can get through the match at your current level of skill.
Okay, I'm tracking. So what happened that put you onto this?
Oh,
you said something that,
yeah.
that funny I should bring this up because you were talking about it.
Well, I don't know if you've heard this story before, but I have a tendency to take breaks from the shooting world because in the past I've reached a peak of my level of participation. And that's where burnout comes from, by the way. When the when the juice isn't worth the squeeze anymore, that's when burnout occurs. And I wouldn't necessarily call it burnout in my case, but I reach a point like, you finish national 17th and you're like, okay, that's depressing. Do I really have another hour a day? And of course, this was before I understood a lot of this other stuff, but I was coming back from a break and I was going to go shoot this outlaw match where nobody knew who I was, because I'm not going to go to a USPSA match and be the great and mighty Steve Anderson author and come in 5th. That's just not an option for me. So I got to go to an outlaw match where nobody knows me. So I go to this outlaw match, and they have a warm-up bay. Load my gun. There's a plate rack at 12 yards. Here I go. Boom, 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 boom. And I might have hit 1 plate. And I think, this is not off to a good start. This is not going well at all. So I do it again, only extremely slowly. Center of the dot, pow. Center of the dot, pow. Probably took 6 seconds to shoot 6 plates. Way, way, way too long. So then I go back into speed mode. Blah, 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 blah. This time I hit 2. And I'm really getting nervous at this point. It's really bothering me that I can't do this. And this guy comes over to me and he says, hey, man, just watch your dot. You'll be fine. So I thought, okay, that's it. I'll just watch the dot. I'll forget about speed. I won't worry about anything because I've just proven to myself that there's nothing I can do today. I know I can get back into my training, but today my only option is to watch the dot. So that's what I'm going to do. Without even realizing it, I had redefined success. Before I had that experience, success was stay anonymous, don't look like an idiot. My new definition of success was watch the dot. You see the difference? The first one is totally beyond my control. I can't determine whether I'll be anonymous. I've signed up as Rusty Shackelford, so nobody knows my name. But what I can do, I can watch the dot. That's what I can do. And it felt so slow that it scared me. I was petrified after the first stage because I thought, man, that was awful. But the good old boys were like, who's this guy? He burned that one down. It's like, whatever. So I just kept doing it. I won that match by 90 seconds. 90 seconds. So to sort of put this in vernacular that will be familiar to my audience, I had if I can do this when I'm not training, imagine what I'd get in a training environment. See, it's easier to trust when you're not training because you have no choice. Does that make sense?
Sure.
But when you have been training, the tendency to rush, try, hurry can sometimes be harder to resist because you think you have all this hot skill because you've been training your butt off. You want to go out and demonstrate it. So, and this is why a lot of guys who have a mental problem think they can out-train this mental problem. And as I've said on my show, trying to out-train a mental problem is like doing sit-ups for a head wound.
Okay.
It's not helpful. It's not helpful. You just make it worse. All you're going to do with those sit-ups is just make your head wound bleed more. Wait a second. I'm doing these glorious sit-ups. My form is perfect, and now my blood is everywhere. What's the problem? Well, you're not treating the actual cause of the problem. You're doing something that you think will help, but you're just making it worse. It's hard for guys to see.
But you hear people say all the time, just watch the sites, but it's not helping them. And then they get frustrated because they're watching the sites and like they're trying to hit a plate and it doesn't go down.
No, it is helping them. They just aren't aware of it, or they don't stick with it long enough.
Okay.
And that's the other thing. And maybe that's why I don't mind talking about it over and over and over again, because you can tell a good instructor from a bad instructor very, very easily. Okay. A bad instructor is going to show you that he knows how to do something. And then if you don't get it, that's your problem. Okay. It's just like I'm technically challenged, right?
Did you say mentally challenged or technically?
Technically challenged, right?
Okay.
Every time you and I do one of these, we have 45 minutes of dealing with Windows XP and all the rest of it, right?
You're ruining the magic, but okay, go ahead.
So at work, I was having some trouble. I have a monitor and I have a giant TV screen. Well, there's a camera system that appears on my monitor, but you have to drag it up to the big TV, okay? But you can, the box has to be a certain way and the mouse has to be on a line. It's got to be on the border. It can't be in the main thing. So I asked one of the younger guys, I said, hey, I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me? And the guy's like, sure. He comes over to the mouse, grabs it, puts it up on the big TV and says, there you go. That's how you do that. I said, you haven't taught me anything. You've shown me how to do something that you already know how to do. Not helpful. Now you need to walk me through this. Okay. When he walked me through it, I could do it. So the way to tell a good instructor from a bad instructor is a good instructor will stay with it until everybody understands it. And maybe that's why I enjoy it so much, trying to find a way to explain this stuff that helps everybody.
Is that why you got into the podcasting aspect of your instruction?
I was writing these articles. People that have been around for a while will remember these Facebook articles I used to write. Those were taking 3 hours a day to write and proofread and publish. And it was a lot of fun. I didn't have 3 hours a day anymore. So I tried to shorten them and then read them. And then somebody sent me an email and said, hey, that's not working. Either improvise it or write it, but don't read me what you've written because it's not what I want. So, okay. So I just winged it one day and I got some great response and I just kept winging it. It was never, people that like to make fun of the lo-fi thrown together nature of my show need to realize that I never intended to be a podcaster ever. I just sort of started doing it and was having fun and helping people. And that's it. I really like helping people.
Now the podcast has gone through some different iterations over the years. You used to have, I'm trying to think of you used to have like a t-shirt and a hat that you would give out. Well, and it said something. Well, I'm trying to remember what it was now.
Well, on the back, it said, it talked about the only time I feel at peace is with the gun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This doesn't seek permission or ask forgiveness. This is me standing by for awesome.
So, yeah, I mean, it started, you had like a small podcast and it kind of grew and then you had all this stuff and then it kind of morphed, when you had some life changes. Where do you see your podcast going?
I have no idea. I've never thought about it. I whatever I know about this, I learned from listening to talk radio. They talk about a 10,000 hour rule for mastering something. Well, I know I've listened to 10,000 hours of talk radio between Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Mark Levin, and Rush and Mark Levin are my favorites. But that's where I learned how to do this. That's where the comedy comes from. That's where the self-deprecation comes from. That's where the jokes about me being a genius come from. That's all stolen straight from Rush. But as far as where it goes, I don't know. I would like to thank you because after the Shooters Summit, my numbers doubled in a week. I don't think I ever told you that. No,
you didn't.
I went from roughly 600 immediate downloaders and listeners. Like, we're talking about day one after a new show. I went from 600 to 1,200, like flipping a switch.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I want to thank you for that. Now, my hate mail also went up the same number. So,
well, I've learned is that if you're doing anything and you put yourself out there, there's going to be an equal amount of people who just hate themselves and feel the need to try and, hate on you. And
sure,
it's just the cost of doing business.
Well, and, speaking of Rush just talked about last week that he was having a hard time when he'd go into a new market and get all the hate mail. And somebody said to him, hey, Rush, what if the number of detractors you have is equal or is somehow connected to your level of success? Because if you do a podcast for yourself in your room without recording it, nobody's ever going to say they don't like it.
That's right. You're not risking anything.
Right.
But some people, and, I guess you could call them the artist, feel the need to draw, paint, play music. It has to get out. And writers are the same way. So some people have to put this stuff out. It's because it's in their DNA.
Yeah.
And other people just don't get it.
Yeah, but as far as where's the show going, honestly, I don't know. I really don't. I've never thought about it. We'll continue to have Dog Noise and Van Halen for sure. Those things will happen.
For those of you who haven't listened to his show, Steve plays a lot of Van Halen. Sometimes he'll play, I think he had some Journey once, or at least you were singing the Journey. Mm-hmm. But you're a child of the 80s, and you 80s rock, that is, not pop, 80s rock, and you let the world know it. But aside from the podcast, you're also an instructor, and you travel the country going to teach these classes. It's one of the things you offer, the ability to have yourself stay at the host's house. Do you still do that?
Yeah, I do. And what I've done now is I give the class 2 fee schedules. One that has me staying with somebody and not getting a car, and one that has me getting a rental car and getting a hotel. Because see, most people with these classes, they're already on the fence because the sport itself is very expensive. The gear's expensive, the ammo's expensive. If you go to major matches, the travel's expensive, the entry fees are expensive. So a lot of times getting people to spend $400, which is nothing in the grand scheme of things, but to get them to spend $400 on 2 days of instruction that can literally save them 5 years of struggle, a lot of times they don't want to do it. But if you can knock $50 off of that, all of a sudden they're on board. Oh, we're saving money. Let's get it done.
But you, who did you train with?
Nobody really. I did take a class from Chris Tilley, and what I learned from that class was that there are no secrets. See, I went to that class with Chris looking for secrets, and I realized if there are any, he's not going to sell them to me for $1,000. It wouldn't be a very good business model, And truly, there really aren't any secrets. There's different ways to present things and different ways to think about things, but there's no secret to this. Before YouTube and before the internet, we used to think that the national match winners were different than the rest of us. They're not. They're the same. It's just like when Rob Latham, somebody said, "There's no way you can see the sights," and he said, "I do everything you do. I just do it a lot faster."
Sure. I think the biggest thing you see from the people who are champions or very good at it is that they're doing the work. That's the
yeah.
biggest thing. People will talk more than actually work, or they'll do the work and then get bored and leave it and rather buy a new gun.
Sure. Yeah, whenever somebody tells me that dry fire is boring, I have to like mentally stop myself from saying things that will be misconstrued as being unkind. You know, like if you were in one of my classes and we did the dry fire tune-up and you turned to me and said, dry fire is boring, it would take all of my energy not to say, then why are you here? Because boring is not an equation of success. Boring, I refuse to accept the premise of that it's even a thing. I mean, who cares if it's boring or not? It's going to get you where you want to go, so you do it. So yeah, that's one of those things that the only thing that gets a bigger rise out of me is slow down and get your hits. That one, That one right there, that really burns my beans.
You know, I've had that said to me several times. As an instructor, I hear other people say it, and I feel confident in telling them, listen, slowing down is all you're going to do is miss slowly, and that's going to make you feel even worse.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the answer to that? So it's not slowing down to get your hits. What should you be doing?
Well, so this comes up in class all the time. And the answer is pay more attention. Pay more attention. So consciously slowing down is only going to result in whatever's happening continue to happen at a slower pace. However, if we pay more attention, not only will we hit the targets acceptably, but it's very likely that we'll begin shooting faster than we thought we could. It's one of the things I say over and over and over again is that vision is a performance-enhancing drug. When you teach yourself to see the entire recoil arc and not just little snippets here and there, and then you go out with the desire to see that stuff, you will shoot at your current level of skill. In many cases, you'll be shooting faster than you would if you had decided how fast to shoot beforehand, like so many people do. Oh, here's the slow part. Now come up to the fast part. Now this part in the middle, it's kind of tricky, but then we're going to get back to the accuracy and then more speed at the end. I mean, how's your brain supposed to process that? It can't. And one of the things that I'm going to ask you guys to write down is you'll never be comfortable in your own head if you keep changing hats. From navigator to analyst to coach to can't wait to eat barbecue and cherry pie. These are all different hats you can wear. Your brain can only do one thing at a time. And I've never found anything, nor have I ever heard anybody else say anything that would detract from this idea of calling your shots or seeing your sights as the most important thing you could be doing. Downside, if there is one, feel slow. Well, sorry. We'll file that comment away at the same place we filed away dry fire is boring. Don't care, refuse to accept the premise.
But sometimes it feels fast, doesn't it?
I think there are times when we can recognize we're shooting very quickly. If that's the same thing as feeling fast, I mean, obviously we know that if we come into 3 low boys a yard away, we're going to hammer those pretty good. And that'll probably, that won't feel the same as, 15-yard partials at your current level of skill. But I don't visualize or plan them any differently. Yes, I know they're going to be shot quicker, but I don't need to make that adjustment.
I know from shooting steel, like a steel challenge course, sometimes you're doing it, and you're like, whoa. I mean, I just know that was fast. I mean, it felt fast. I felt detached from it. And I think that took me a long time to do, is to detach like my mental control from what my body was doing. Because when I controlled it or tried to shoot at a speed, it wasn't fast. But when I let go and kind of stood back, my body did amazing things for me.
Yeah. Well, then that's your current level of skill, and that's probably faster than you would have shot if you had decided or predicted how fast to shoot. And that's a great example of what I mean when I say vision is a performance-enhancing drug. The more you see, the better you'll shoot. And I love it when I'm scrolling through Facebook and I see Jerry Mikulik agree with me. When he says, And he says, now it doesn't say Steve was right at the top of the sign, but it does say seeing fast is shooting fast. And then down below it says, I wish I had learned that 30 years ago and 1,000,000 rounds ago. So what I try to do is save people that 5 years of struggle. Now, I really am interested in getting a guy from C class to A class in 6 weeks. How many people have you met, Ark, that say, I've been stuck in C for 3 years?
5 years.
My next question is, what's your practice schedule? Because I have never met a C class shooter that has one.
No. And, I guess you had said it at the beginning of this beginning of this podcast. What's your level of participation? And that, these are terms that I learned from you and from reading the Lanny Basham book. It makes sense when you talk about goals, what's your level of participation? And for my understanding of it, there's some people who shoot this as a social event. They go out on a Sunday, they're going to, hang out, they're going to see buddies, maybe have a picnic later. And this is it for them. This is fun for them. They don't get better because they're, not putting any effort into it. But for the guys that want to be champions, that want to be GMs, they're practicing every day. They're dry practicing. They're taking classes. They're going to matches. They're trying to do everything they possibly can to grow as a shooter, and that's their participation. I mean, I'm on the right track with that, aren't I?
Absolutely. The easiest way to think about level of participation is the amount of resources you are able to dedicate to your sport. Okay. If I want to be, I don't even know what they call the NASCAR champion. Is there a NASCAR champion of the whole thing? Or is it a point system? Or it doesn't matter. But if I want to win the NASCAR, okay, and I don't own a race car, is there an amount of desire that's going to help me achieve that goal? There's not. There is nothing I can do until I have a race car. Now, if I have a race car and no gasoline, can I be a champion of NASCAR? No, it's impossible. Doesn't matter how bad I want it. It's not a question of how many times I've seen Rocky. It doesn't matter. Until I can afford gasoline and tires, I can't be a NASCAR champion. Now, once I have those things, that's always going to be my limiting factor. Okay, I have 4 tires. Well, you probably need 16 to get through a race. Come back to me when you got 16 tires. Okay, I got 16 tires. All right, the entry fee's 10 grand. Have you got 10 grand? No, I don't have 10 grand. All right, come back when you do. Okay, so level of participation is always going to be what can you commit? And that's where, when you have the correct level of participation, now is where the desire and the hunger and the training can really make a difference. It's not meant to discourage people or provide an easy way out. It's just the reality of life. If you don't have a race car, you can't win a race.
And I
feel like that sounded depressing.
No, it's not depressing, but I think some people just need to come to terms. I mean, for some people, it doesn't matter.
Now, we are very fortunate in this sport because you can dry fire your butt off and get really, really good, really, really fast. And it can be done very, very quickly. You can teach your body how to do these things at a very, very rapid rate. If I had known when I first started what I know now about the mental game and subconscious skill and all the rest of it, I could have made Grandmaster way faster than 9 months.
Which is still pretty fast. It's still pretty fast.
It is, but I was so stupid back then. I had no idea what I was doing, but I've always been too dumb to quit. Once I get my hooks into something, I've always been too dumb to quit. So I just trained harder and harder and harder and harder and harder. I was dry firing 3 hours a day, probably. I remember going to the range in January, and those of you that have been to the PCSI range in Circleville, Ohio, know that it's a long, winding gravel road down to the bottom of the range. Well, I had a Ford Ranger that had been lowered with a racing spoiler in front, and I was on Yokohama racing tires, my little hot rod Ford Ranger. I got down to the bottom just fine. And I used charcoal briquettes in the burn barrels to warm my hands while I was loading mags. So here I am loading mags over burning charcoal briquettes, Arik. Okay? And it's 8:30 in the morning. And I've been at it for an hour. And then I go to point my little Ranger back up the hill, and guess what? Ranger doesn't go up the hill. Ranger is now a rear-wheel drive snowplow. So I put that truck in first gear, and I pushed it 200 yards up that gravel road. Pushed it. And then I went home, took a shower, and went to work. Came back home and bought a Ford F-150. Four-wheel drive.
Sure.
But that shows you what the talent code book calls the rage to master. There was nothing that was going to stop me from reaching that goal. Nothing. So I've learned to be very, very careful what goals I set, because they will happen. They will happen.
That's very interesting. I like that. I think people can take away that type of mentality of putting your mind on something. And I think even Lanny Bashan says, what you think about, what you talk about is going to happen.
That principle got me fired from a really good job, because we were selling used DVDs and used video games. We were still selling VHS, for crying out loud, and sales are going down every year, right? So we have this annual meeting, and the boss says, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, why don't we start a profit sharing system for the store managers and get them behaving more entrepreneurially?" "What do you mean?" "Well, let's set up a relatively high sales goal and give them $500. And then if they beat that by 10%, let's give them 10% of every dollar they make after that." "Oh, that'll never work." "Good, then it won't cost you anything to try it." "Well, if you put it like that, all right, Jim, try it." So we tried it. And my market outperformed every other market. I was 96% of my budget in sales compared to 60% to the next closest market. And some people got jealous of that, and they didn't care for it, and before long I had a bullseye on my back. But I gave those store managers one job: sales, and I rewarded them appropriately. So whatever we think about, talk about, write about, I had them looking at their sales every hour and writing it down. Think about, talk about, write about. I'd call them at 1. I'd ask the part-timers, how many part-timers at Taco Bell do you think know what their sales are?
Probably none.
None. That's exactly right. But my part-timers knew exactly what their sales were at 1 o'clock and exactly what their sales were at 2 o'clock. And so now, if their goal for the day is 1,500 and they're at 12:50 and at 6 p.m., they start thinking like businessmen. So when somebody comes in and says, "Hey, do you have a PS3?" Instead of saying, "Oh, I don't know," they say, "Yes, we do. It's right over here." Mm-hmm. We've redefined success. But that just shows the power of that principle. What Lanny Bashan also says is that if you write down your goal every day, only one of two things can happen. You'll either achieve that goal or you'll stop writing it down. Everybody wants to lose 15 pounds. But who gets up every day and writes down their weight on a piece of paper? I don't. But if I got up every day and wrote down 201, next day I'd write down 201, I'd make a change. And then I might write down 199. Hey, that's going in the right direction. So now I'm starting to think about 199. What do I have to do to write down 198? So having that goal and writing it down changes how you think. And that's why it works.
When you were first coming up in the shooting world as a competitor, who were you looking at? Who was the guy that if you said, "I can only be like him, I know I had made it"?
There wasn't any one person. The problem that I had was it was relatively easy to make Grandmaster, but it's so much harder to be nationally competitive. You can make Grandmaster very easily by dry firing and going to the range a little bit, and you can get that done very, very quickly. You'll notice there's grandmasters everywhere, right, Arik?
Actually, I thought there was only like 5% of all the USPSA.
I understand that, but most clubs have one now, right? Most clubs have a GM, don't they?
Okay, for the sake of the argument, I say yes, but I'm trying to think of the club that I shoot at. I don't think there is a grandmaster. There's several masters, but no grandmaster.
When I first started, that wasn't the case. The best shooter at my local club was a C-class guy.
Okay, so that's a huge disparity. That's for sure.
Yeah, so we have many more grandmasters than we used to. So I didn't have anything to compare myself to. All I knew is I had a card that said I was a GM. You know, as far as heroes, my hero was Travis in the beginning. Travis to me was like, he's like a rock star. He still probably is, you know.
What about it? What about him? The way he shot, or
he never BS'd me. I don't want to curse on your program because we both try to run a family show. He told me the truth. He always had time for my stupid questions, and he always told me the truth, and he tried to help me. And I really respected that about him. But no, there wasn't any single shooter that I aspired to emulate. I just wanted to be up there with them. You know, my goal has never been to win nationals. My goal has always been to be in the top 16.
And how close did you get?
17. That was the year that I personified checkered flag syndrome. That was also the year that I won High Master in Production by accident. So I shot this whole match in bullseye mode, and you can see this match if Saul Kirsch was selling a DVD of it for a while that I was on because I was on the Super Squad that year, and you can see me on one stage. I shot that whole match in fearful bullseye mode. Fearful bullseye mode means I'm going to do everything perfectly and not take any chances. Okay? It's going to wind up being significantly slower than your current level of skill. But I was doing good. I was penalty-free. Coming into the last stage, there were 3 or 4 targets across the middle of the bay. Then you had to go down this alley and finish up on some close ones. So here I am. Perfect alpha, perfect alpha, perfect alpha, perfect alpha, perfect alpha. Look down the alley and fire the second shot, and it went wide, and I had no idea. And there I go, down the alley. I finished my stage, and the guy I was sharing my golf cart with was just shaking his head. And I'm like, what? What's the problem? What's the problem? He points out there, and it's Alpha Mike.
Oh.
And that one shot, and I don't know where I would have been, but as you know, at Nationals, you take a mic on a stage, you're on the 3rd page of results when you would have been on the 1st page of results. And that one shot kept me out of the top 16. So, but don't worry, I'm not done yet. I'm kind of quiet now, but I'll be making noise here before too long.
Well, that was one of probably the more interesting series in your podcast is when you and the other guy were training for nationals that year, and you were talking about what you guys were doing. You had the secret plan and physical conditioning, and it was fascinating to listen to that stuff.
We trained our butts off. Really, really trained hard. Yeah. One of the things we did was the Get to Work book has this drill called Alpha Count, and it's a shoot on the move drill in a square. And there's a lot of versions of this out there. And this one, all you do is you have 3 targets, and you shoot 2 shots apiece moving forward, then you holster, 2 shots to the right, holster, 2 shots apiece backing up, holster, 2 shots apiece to the left, holster. And you just count the A's. 24 is a perfect score. Well, this particular year, we wouldn't stop until we got 24 out of 24 at 25 yards.
Wow.
So let me tell you, how many times do you think I shot a 23 and had to redo
it? Sure.
But when you do that and you see a 15-yard open target, that's like, come to Papa. I could be galloping and shoot that thing in my sleep. That's great. One of the best compliments I ever got was I was gaming a stage and walking through, and they had an open target at 18 yards, and I'm doing my little duck walk, and my squad mate says, "You're not going to shoot that on the move, are you?" I said, "Oh yeah, I train at 25 yards, son. Aren't you going to shoot on the move?" He goes, "No, but I'm not Steve Anderson." So that was a nice one.
You mentioned your book, Get to Work, which is the third book that you wrote. Your first one's Refinement and Repetition. Second one was Principles of Performance. And then you got away from alliteration and went with Get to Work. You going to do a fourth book?
Yeah, I've already done a fourth book. You should know this. You want to hear the fourth book?
Well, that's the tongue-in-cheek fourth book. I mean a real fourth book.
There's actually a fifth book.
Okay, let's do the fifth book.
It is outlined, and it is, geez, I haven't looked at it in a little while because I've been so busy. It's probably 60%, 70% done. It's going to be probably an ebook only because everybody wants an ebook, and the diagrams in the other three are not friendly to the ebook format. The people that I've talked to want an insane amount of money to digitize those charts, the actual drills, which is why ebooks don't have pictures typically, because everybody has a different device and the sizes are different, and drawings don't translate very well. So maybe we'll do that at some point, but for sure the next one will be ebook and maybe ebook only to satisfy that request.
So there is a book.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be much simpler, very, very short. Because what made me realize this is there's a lot of people who don't want Zen and they don't want a lot of fluff. They're the people that can't finish Enos's book. They hear about it and they read it and they get to the third page and they're like, wait a second. There's nothing in here about grip, or nothing in here about ripping fast splits. This is dumb. So they're too impatient to get the true wisdom that's in there. So the one that I'm doing now would be for impatient people who just want, okay, what do I do right now? How do I solve this problem?
Well, I mean, that's the world we live in. We live in these 140 character or less constant updates through our social media. So it's tough to sit down. It's tough to sit down and read something and have to think about it to get the interpretation.
Everybody's playing on their phones. It's like they're waiting for oh my gosh, what did my friend have for lunch? Oh, he's at Taco Bell. I got to show him. I'm at Chipotle. Who cares? Oh, it's the instant gratification world is just awful. And the Bernie Sanders crowd is even worse than the instant gratification crowd. They want it right now and they want it for free. And that is not the world I grew up in,
So you had to work for it.
Yeah, and Laney Basham also says that we value the things we earn way more than things we get for free.
You mean working hard to get your first car means something more than your parents buying you a brand new BMW?
Well, I don't know. A brand new BMW would be pretty sweet. My first car was a 64 and a half Mustang, and my stepdad loaned me the money, but I paid him back. It's just like my buddy Brandon, who I write about in the book as well. When he first got of the age to have a phone, he has a phone. And you see Brandon a week later, is that a new phone? Yeah, I broke the old one. A couple weeks later, he's got another new phone. What happened to? Oh, I got a new one. I lost the other one. And then I noticed he had the same phone for like 3 months. So, hey, what's up with that? Yeah, my mom made me pay for this one. So that shows you right there the things we work for, we value far more.
I just have a couple more questions for you, and they're short questions. So,
well, they will be till I get a hold of them.
Well, I'll try and phrase them so you have no choice. If you could pick any gun to shoot, which gun would it be?
I prefer heavier guns. Are we talking about within divisions, or what are we talking about?
Well, whatever division you want to shoot, whatever division's the one you like the most.
Well, the SIG 320 is absolutely phenomenal. And we just got the first few X5s. I've had a chance to shoot an X5. I will own one here before too long. And that thing is just built from the ground up to be the gun outside of open and perhaps limited, but as far as your minor divisions, your carry optics and your production, holy moly, that thing is race ready right out of the box. But, I've never been a gun guy in the traditional sense. I've only ever had 2 open guns my entire career, and one of them's only 2 years old. I love my Caspian open guns because they're heavy.
Okay, fair enough.
So that's 2 guns. I mean, I shortened it a little bit. Now, I also really miss my Beretta Elite 2s. I really loved those guns. They were nice. The only problem was they ate away at the knuckle of my middle right finger. I still have the callus from it because it's just so sharp, that trigger guard. But those were great guns.
If you had an unlimited supply of money and could, basically not have to work a day job and shoot all you want, would you, or what would you do with your time in terms of shooting?
I would put myself through my own class every day. Meaning I would go out and do myself the things that I encourage people to do. I would dry fire for 90 minutes in the morning. I would shoot groups. Then I would work on speed and movement. There would be a very high physical fitness level in there. But I basically would just do my own class every day, to whatever extent my body could put up with it. I'll be 45 in July, and something always hurts and something always is broken, But outside of that, to whatever extent my body could tolerate it, I would just train my butt off, because now that I have the understanding, the training that I would be able to do would be exponentially more valuable.
Well, we're almost halfway through 2017. What is your goal as far as shooting goes for the second half?
My goal is to continue to train people and be in a position where I can buy my own little shooting property. That is my only goal right now, is to make that happen. I've done more training this year than the previous years combined. I'm working my butt off. Business is good, and we should be in a position within a year or so to actually do something like that. And then I'll be pretty close to the scenario that you just mentioned. I won't have unlimited time or money, but I'll be in a position where I can roll out of bed and shoot, and then go to work if I have to, and then come back home and shoot. I'll be in a much better position, because right now I'm an hour away from a range. And being an hour away from a range means you've got to drive an hour, obviously, but your training time is reduced because you've got setup time, cleanup time, all the rest of it. So it's a bit of a handicap. It's not unbeatable, but it's a bit of a handicap. But we're gonna get a shooting school built before we do anything else.
Since you don't have a school, what do people need to do in order to train with you?
Well, there's 2 ways we can do it. If you want to come to South Central Ohio, Zanesville is the closest big town. That'll put us within 30 minutes of the beautiful Rainers Range. We can train there just about any day you want. And I can take individuals, I can take small groups, it doesn't matter. Or you can become a class sponsor, do the legwork, secure the range, handle all the props and everything with the range, and then you'll get the class for free for doing all that legwork. And either way, all you have to do is email me, steve@andersonshooting.com, and we'll make it happen. I always get a letter 3 weeks after class that says, hey, I did everything you told me to do, and I won my match for the first time. Or, I was able to get from C class to B class. Happens every time.
Well, Steve, I want to thank you for coming on the show again. We won't talk about the first one. And I know you'll be a part of the Shooter Summit this year. And people can find you weekly on your podcast, That Shooting Show. So, Steve, thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, Ark. Thanks for having me.
If you're interested in studying with Steve, obviously I will link in the show notes his website, and also I'll link to his books. They're hard to come by. Sometimes in Amazon, they'll have the older editions, but they're very tough to find. Also, did you know that we have a YouTube channel, Firearms Nation? If you go over there, you can see different kind of videos, from gear reviews to some of the ideas that Steve talked about on the podcast, and all sorts of shooting instruction type videos. It's called Firearms Nation. It's on YouTube. Check it out. If you haven't started training with your firearm yet, today is the perfect day to start. If you know that you need some quick ideas and you don't have any, stop by firearmsnation.com and register to get your free ebook. It's free. It's called The 5 Steps to an Awesome Firearms Training Program. It is the same plan that I started off on before I even met Steve. This quick plan will get you on a solid foundation to start training no matter what level you're at. Join us next week for another interview with someone on the Firearms Nation. And don't forget, carry your gun, get some training, look out for one another, especially these days. We're all in this together.
Thank you for listening to the Firearms Nation podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Go to firearmsnation.com right now for show notes, awesome videos, and be sure to sign up to get your free firearms training ebook. Come back next week for another episode of the Firearms Nation podcast. Join the nation.